So the immune system, for example, the adaptive immune system makes antibodies to attack things that are not us and kill things that are not us that are going to hurt us, like an infection. Or if one of our cells turns cancerous, it's not us anymore, it's just going to hurt us. The immune system jumps in and kills the cancer cell before it ever has a chance to multiply. So, for example, cancer is the flip side of the same coin as autoimmune disease. So everything you do to prevent or reverse autoimmune disease is preventing cancer risk. So on average, humans get cancer at least 7 times in a lifetime. But we should get to 90 years of age and be able to say, hey, I'm 90, I've never had cancer in my lifetime. What you're really saying though, oh, I'm 90, on average, I've had cancer 7 times in my lifetime, but every time a cell turned cancerous, my immune system, doing the right thing, jumped in, attacked that cell, killed it, it's gone. But then when you get a confused immune system, it actually can start making antibodies attacking our own body parts.
Welcome to Unleash Thyself, where we delve into the frontiers of health and wellness. I am Konstantin Morun, and today we're honored to host Dr. David Bilstrom, MD, a pioneer in the field of functional medicine and a visionary in treating autoimmune diseases. Dr. Bilstrom has dedicated nearly 3 decades to revolutionizing healthcare, focusing on treating the root cause of chronic illness rather than just managing symptoms. His expertise in functional and regenerative medicine has helped thousands reverse autoimmune diseases and prevent future health issues. He's passionate about resetting and optimizing epigenetics in both children and adults, challenging the traditional notion that illness is an inevitable part of aging. As a director of the International Autoimmune Institute and the Bingham Memorial Center for Functional Medicine, Dr. Bilstrom leads the way in holistic and integrative approach to health. His centers are renowned for their innovative use of nature and wellness programs, setting a new standard in autoimmune disease treatment. In this episode, Dr. Bilstrom will share his insights on how the body can heal itself, the critical role of gut health in overall well-being, and the power of vitamin D and structured silver solutions in treating autoimmune conditions. We'll explore his approach to fixing gut health, especially in cases where the autoimmune disease targets the gut itself. Dr. Bilstrom believes that with the right information and approach, there are no illnesses we cannot overcome. He will discuss how individuals can take control of their health, the importance of managing stress, and the role of epigenetics in shaping our health destiny. This conversation promises to be a deep dive into the possibilities of functional medicine and a healthier, disease-free life. So prepare to be enlightened by Dr. David Bilstrom's groundbreaking work and his mission to transform healthcare. Remember to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these impactful stories to light. And share this episode with those you hold dear in your life, as it can truly change their lives. Let's begin our journey with Dr. David Bilstrom and discover the path to optimal health and well-being. Welcome, beautiful souls. I'm here with Dr. David Bilstrom. Dr. David, it's such a pleasure to have you with us, and I cannot wait to have a beautiful conversation with you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Konstantin.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So let's dive right into it. You now specialize in helping people overcome autoimmune diseases, but also prepare themselves so they don't have to deal with them in the first place. How did you stumble upon that?
Well, I saw it a lot in my private practice for a lot of years, but then when I decided to change the way that autoimmune disease was dealt with worldwide, it really stemmed from reading this absolutely heartbreaking article in the New York Times about this famous journalist who was losing her career, but also her life to lupus, the autoimmune disease lupus. And when I read this, and I had already helped many people turn around autoimmune diseases of all kinds, including lupus, I said, okay, I got to take this 20 years of my experience to a bigger stage, because people need to know that lupus or any autoimmune disease is not a life sentence. And unfortunately, as so often the case with chronic disease, it can become a death sentence for you. And I said, we got to let people know that there is an answer to this epidemic, this autoimmune disease, and it really comes from addressing the root cause of the immune system disruption itself.
So powerful. And I want to dive right into it before we look at the root cause, because as I mentioned to you offline, this hits close to home. My partner has been diagnosed last year with an autoimmune disease, the Graves' disease, and she was told that this is not curable. At best, it can go in remission and she has to be on pills. Now, of course, like you, I don't necessarily believe that anything that happens to us, we cannot change it. I strongly believe that we have the power to change anything and everything. That includes our health, our situation, anything that we want. And it sounds like you believe the same thing and you've seen it.
Well, absolutely. The body's default mode is to move towards wellness. So, like I use an example in clinic. If you walk around your house with bare feet and you kick a chair leg, but you start hopping around in terrible pain, right? And but you're not thinking, oh, great, I'm going to have this terrible toe pain for the next 50 years. You're thinking, well, if I give my body 2 minutes, it'll go away. I'll be fine, and I'll try not to do that again because it really hurt. But when you get these chronic diseases like autoimmune disease, it's real easy to say, oh, my body, it just can't do it's just not taking care of things, my poor body. And the body's like, wait, I can fix this. I know how to fix this. You just got to give me a chance. But until you give me that chance, you're going to be stuck with this.
Love that. Love that analogy too. So how do we give it a chance?
So when you get autoimmune disease, it's really, you have a confused immune system. So the immune system, for example, the adaptive immune system makes antibodies to attack things that are not us and kill things that are not us that are going to hurt us, like an infection. Or if one of our cells turns cancerous, it's not us anymore, it's just going to hurt us. The immune system jumps in and kills the cancer cell before it ever has a chance to multiply. So, like, for example, cancer is the flip side of the same coin as autoimmune disease. So everything you do to prevent or reverse autoimmune disease is preventing cancer risk. So on average, humans get cancer at least 7 times in a lifetime. But we should get to 90 years of age and be able to say, hey, I'm 90, I've never had cancer in my lifetime. What you're really saying though, oh, I'm 90, on average, I've had cancer 7 times in my lifetime, but every time a cell turned cancerous, my immune system, doing the right thing, jumped in, attacked that cell, killed it, it's gone. But then when you get a confused immune system, it actually can start making antibodies attacking our own body parts. And rule of thumb, it's never a good idea to attack your own body parts. You're basically self-destructing. Never a good idea to self-destruct, right?
100%.
So
I can imagine.
the other part of the immune system is the innate immune system that's really involved in inflammation control. So what we now know is that so much of chronic disease is either a problem with the adaptive immune system, we're making antibodies attacking our own body part, self-destructing, or a disruption of the innate immune system. We can't turn off inflammation. That inflammation grows, creating chronic disease. So this is where things that we didn't think were immune system related are truly immune system related. Things like heart attacks and strokes and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia and chronic kidney disease and osteoporosis, even thinning of the bones. Even 70% of all autism is one particular autoimmune disease. So this is where they say things like cardiovascular disease. We used to think it was just what you ate and all this other kind of stuff, but actually what it is a chronic inflammatory disease. And that inflammation just happens to go to the weak spot in an individual that might be the cardiovascular system, or in other people it might be the bones or the eyes or the brain or other kind of things. And so if you know the central mechanisms that disrupt the immune system, you're in a position to reverse the disruption and reverse the chronic disease, because now you've opened up the window of opportunity for your body to fix something and it's ready to go. All right, hot dog, I can fix this now.
Wow, that's so powerful. It got me thinking there. So, if I understand this correctly, Dr. David, it's about, well, part of it at least is inflammation that
Correct.
likely comes in from outside factors like the food we eat, the toxins we allow in, or not necessarily allow in by choice, but they come into our body. So, when it comes to this inflammation, then, would that be one of the root causes that we can, if we go after, we increase our chances to beat those diseases or not even have them in the first place and have the proper immune system?
Correct. One of the challenges of being healthy nowadays is what you were referring to, like the environmental toxins that get in, foods that get in that are not, a lot of this highly processed fast foods, I don't even call them foods. I say, well, these are food like substances. You can't even call them food, right? They have no nutrient value. They're full of toxic stuff. They're not food. We live in such a stressful world, emotional stress and all this, that it's very challenging to stay healthy nowadays. So you really can see this in particularly in young people, where Every other kid's got autism spectrum disorder, developmental delays, ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, all the attempts on people's own lives, the suicide attempts, and then every other kid's got a peanut allergy or gluten intolerance or asthma allergies. It's just so hard to be healthy. And so if you're not actively doing something to help your health, you're getting more unhealthy as time goes on. Now, one of the important things to remember is, though, like when we talked about, well, if you stub your toe, you got terrible pain, but it's not going to last forever. The body is so good at healing itself, fixing itself. That's what it does every day. It just self-corrects and fixes this, it fine tunes. And so if you start getting chronic health issues, your body has kind of exhausted all its own efforts to be able to do this, and it needs some help. But there's very specific things that cause this and very specific things that we can do to reverse the process. Or with the right kind of testing, we can actually kind of see this stuff coming like 10, 20 years ahead, like type 2 diabetes. You can see it coming 20 years ahead. Nobody should have with diabetes because you can just see it coming so far ahead. But the same thing happens like with type 1 diabetes, where more the young people and they stop making insulin. You can actually see this stuff coming on average, even the youngest kids, like 2.5 to 3 years before it happens. And a lot of people is 10 to 20 years before it happens. The kids that get it over age 5, the teenagers, you can see it coming a decade ahead. So if we know where to look, we could really prevent just about all this stuff. But thank goodness the body is so good at healing. Even once it's well established, the body's in a position to turn around.
So if I understand it correctly, then based on everything we've talked so far, is there really is no illness that we can't overturn if we have the right information.
I think you're just about right. Even the type 1 diabetes, it look like, well, once you get that, you're stuck with it. But the newer data that's coming out says the opposite, including a study I just found 2 weeks ago as I'm doing this real deep dive into, I think I see what might be able to turn around type.
Hey, it's Konstantin here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. And if you want to reach out directly to me, send me an email at konstantin@unleashthyself.com. I value any and all feedback. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode.
1 diabetes. Harvard published a study in 2013 that they gave mice type 1 diabetes, and if they gave them this bile acid made by the liver called TUDCA. Ideally, the liver makes it for its own health, the health of the kidney, pancreas, gut, brain, eyes, you name it, kills cancer cells, all this stuff. Well, it's available in a capsule. Well, 10 years ago, Harvard gave mice type 1 diabetes, and if they gave them this TUDCA within 100 days of creating the type 1 diabetes, totally turned it around. And fantastic information. I go, oh my gosh, I think I was correct that could be the answer to this. But it was very sad because here's Harvard 10 years ago, and their study go, well, if this TUDCA ever became available as a prescription medicine, we might have something. I'm like, you guys, it doesn't need to be a prescription medicine. You used the supplement 10 years ago. It's still available nowadays. We don't have to wait for these things to become prescription medicines. They're available without a prescription. And so many of these interventions are truly, they're just not prescription medicines. We just don't have prescription medicines or surgeries for a lot of chronic health issues, but it doesn't mean there's not an answer.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. That brings up so many questions and so many thoughts in my mind. But let's go back to the inflammation for a second. So if that's a big part of the root cause, what are some things that people can do to literally go after inflammation and say, you know what, I want to take control of my health and unleash the best version of myself physically? And of course, that will impact your emotions and mental state and spiritual state, all of it.
Absolutely. It's all connected. Yeah. And so you referenced something before we started recording, which is the gut. And the gut is the super central mechanism in all this chronic health stuff. And we talk about the 7 central mechanisms in all health or ill health. And the gut's the first. The second is the stress hormone cortisol. The third tends to be food sensitivities, where the gut disruption creates a leaky gut called an intestinal permeability that drives food sensitivities. Now, foods can bug people 2 ways, either right away or later. So the immediate reactions, people can figure this out themselves better than any test we have, because the person says, geez, every time I eat this food, I don't feel well. But then the delayed hypersensitivity reactions are when you eat a food and it's only the food proteins, but they are still in your system days or weeks, even a month after you eat them, and all of a sudden they whack you, creating inflammation. So people may say something like, geez, I have all this inflammation. I know it's got to be coming from someplace, but I know it's not what I'm eating because nothing makes me feel sick. Well, it doesn't make you feel sick in the obvious way. It makes you feel sick in the sneaky, delayed way, and that's because of a leaky gut. Well, then the gut disruption creates vitamin deficiencies because now you can't digest your food and get the nutrients out. You get vitamin deficient. That drives inflammation and disruption of the immune system. And then when the gut's off, you can't get rid of toxins from the body. So your cells make toxic byproducts metabolism every day. Got to get rid of them. But then to your point, all these environmental toxins get in. Well, you got to get them out. Well, even if you have the right vitamins and minerals, nutrients to run your detox pathways, even if you're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables that have DIM in them that help you run your detox pathways, if you get them into the gut, but you have a leaky gut, it can't get in the toilet when you poop. They just recycle back in through the leakiness and they accumulate over time. And then a huge thing that everybody forgets is that infections are part of all chronic disease. They don't tend to be the infections that drive obvious disease like high fevers and this kind of stuff. They drive chronic inflammation. So this is where, because 80% of the immune system surrounds the gut disruption throws off the immune system. You get these infections that drive chronic disease. Things like Epstein-Barr virus, Coxsackie viruses, including a couple of these Coxsackie viruses that involved in type 1 diabetes. Mycoplasma is a common one. The tick-borne diseases are common ones. Herpes virus 6 is a common one. So these are the infections that we know drive chronic disease, but it all comes from the gut, because without the gut disruption disrupting the immune system, these darn bugs wouldn't have got in the first place, or some of them get into everybody, but the immune system should keep them dormant. So like Epstein-Barr virus gets into everybody. If the immune system doesn't keep it dormant, it can rear its ugly head and give you mono. But then it can also do that later and give autoimmune thyroid diseases, give multiple sclerosis, do all these other kind of things as well. So when you talk about these 7 central mechanisms, it really goes back to the gut as the central mechanism that then drives everything else that drives the inflammation.
Wow, so powerful there. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. David. And what comes up right away for me is this idea that I play with a lot in my life. Is like, let's look at the foundation of everything that we do in life. And I talk about the psychology being my foundation or people's foundations before mindset can be set on top. Because if you don't have a strong foundation around your thoughts, your beliefs, then any mindset is going to collapse on top of it. And it sounds like if we take this to medicine, based on what I understand, if we look at what you just said, the gut is the foundation. So if we don't take care of that first, then it doesn't really matter, or at least it doesn't matter as much what we do after. Is that correct?
That's right. And if you can heal the gut, you really set that foundation so that it makes it so much easier for everything else you might do for your health work better.
Okay. And then, of course, you touched on the food, which is nutrition, very, very important. So how do we fix the gut? Then how do we, first of all, is there anything that we can do to realize what state we're in, or does it even matter? Can we go straight to fixing it?
Absolutely. You always know the gut's disrupted. You always know you got the stress hormone cortisol involved. You always know you got these infections. And so knowing that really informs you what you got to do. Now, I think one thing that would be lovely is if we didn't disrupt the gut in the first place. But so much of chronic life involves disrupting the gut. So like antibiotics terribly disrupt the gut. Stress disrupts the gut. Things like Motrins and Advils, anti-inflammatories, disrupt the gut. Things they use for blood sugar control, like metformin prescription medicine, disrupts the gut. Acid blocking medicines disrupt the gut. There's so many things that disrupt the gut that we'd like to avoid. But the way things are, this is why so many people have messed up guts, because this is kind of like what everybody uses and the life they live. And so ideally, a central mechanism in gut health is what they call the intestinal microbiome, the mix of the good, bad bugs in the gut. So everything I just listed basically kills the good bacteria and disrupts it. And so you want a lot of the good, not a lot of the bad. It's kind of like warriors fighting your battles for you. You want a lot of these warriors fighting your battles for you so you can win all your battles. You don't want much of the bad guys. But all these different things can shift the balance the wrong way, and that creates this central mechanism for everything, including, there was a cool study I read just a couple of weeks ago. Every body part has its own unique microbiome. The palm of your dominant hand has a different microbiome than the palm of your non-dominant hand. Back of the hand is different than the palm. Elbow crease different than your pit. And so everyone has this unique microbiome, including breast tissue has its own microbiome. Well, there's this fascinating article that talks about the intestinal microbiome breast axis. So the intestinal microbiome disruption creates disruption of the breast microbiome that increases breast cancer risk. Just like the disrupted intestinal microbiome connects with the cells in the pancreas that make insulin. Disrupted intestinal microbiome, pancreatic beta islet cell disruption, that axis. And so there's an axis, the most common one people know about up to this point has been the gut-brain connection. They call the gut the second brain because of this. And so it's this gut disruption that's connected to every other body part that then drives all chronic disease. But then you fix that, you're in a position to shift everything else in the body the right way so you don't end up getting type 1 diabetes, depression, anxiety, breast cancer, all these kind of things, in addition to the autoimmune diseases themselves.
Yeah, wow. Fascinating. And I love the fact that more and more science comes out on this, and you're able to find it and share it with so many people. And I want to thank you for the bottom of my heart, because it is so fascinating to me as someone that's likes science, likes to look at what medicine is discovering, but I don't have access to as much information as you do, or the background. And I know the people in the audience will love to hear this. So, okay, how do we fix the gut?
So a very big central mechanism in gut ill health and health is vitamin D receptors. So there's receptors on cells for things the cells need to function. So it can attach and tell the cell what to do, or attach and go in the cell, tell the cell what to do. So vitamin D, vitally important, as are a lot of other things. There's receptors on every cell in our body for insulin. There's receptors in every cell in our body for thyroid. There's receptors in every cell in our body for vitamin D. But receptors can become resistant to whatever they're supposed to be told what to do. So the classic one is insulin resistance, where you may have a pancreas that makes insulin and maybe even extra insulin, but if the receptors become resistant, you get this insulin resistance. You can have all the insulin in the world, it can't attach and do the work, and it's almost like you don't have insulin. Well, it turns out every cell has vitamin D receptors, but it turns out that there are so many more vitamin D receptors in the gut than any other body part. And when we discovered that, we're like, oh my gosh, vitamin D must be super important for gut health. But then it turns out these receptors in the gut for vitamin D can become resistant to vitamin D. So vitamin D, unbelievably important. But you could have all the vitamin D in the world, and if it can't attach and do the work in the gut, it's not even there. So what happens when these vitamin D receptors become resistant? The intestinal microbiome shifts the wrong way. You lose the good, overgrow the bad. The lining of the gut actually starts creating inflammation, hurting itself. And this is where you hear something like the gut can become an engine of inflammation. It's actually making its own inflammation, destroying itself, and then ultimately creating inflammation every place else. And then the lining of the gut stops making proteins that keep away bad bugs, called antimicrobial peptides. So if you can fix the vitamin D receptors in the gut, it takes three things used together: daily vitamin D, probiotics, and something called butyrate. It comes in a capsule. Butyrate is actually something made by the good bacteria in the gut, called a short-chain fatty acid. The gut makes it to keep itself healthy. But when all this mess is going on, good bacteria don't make butyrate. You don't have enough of the good bacteria, and they don't do their work. So we call this the foundational triad: vitamin D, probiotic, and butyrate. Fixes the vitamin D receptor resistance. The receptors now become sensitive to vitamin D. Vitamin D can attach and do its work. Intestinal microbiome rights itself. The gut stops making inflammation, killing itself. The gut starts making antimicrobial peptides to keep the bad bugs down forever. And the studies that first came out in 2018 about this, they go, oh my gosh, this is exactly what you want to do if you want to turn around autoimmune disease of the gut. The autoimmune disease actually attack the gut. So if you think, okay, we can fix the gut, we can fix autoimmune disease, we can turn it around. Well, how do you fix the gut if the autoimmune disease is attacking the gut itself, right?
Yeah.
Got this vicious cycle going. So they go, this is exactly what you can do to get rid of these autoimmune diseases of the gut and to get rid of recurrent infections of the gut like H. pylori, C. diff, all these kind of things. But then they said, oh my gosh, this seems like such a central mechanism. It looks like what you need to do to fix everything. And sure enough, 6 months later, the same researchers, I give a little shout out to University of Illinois, because that's where I went to med school, but University of Illinois, Chicago researchers, Same researcher 6 months later go, oh my gosh, this is a quote unquote nuclear weapon against diabetes. You can turn around all diabetes with this. But then every article has been coming out since is like, oh my gosh, this was true. So like 2 years ago, Harvard came out with a study that they said, well, if you can fix the intestinal microbiome this way, and I'm like, that's what happens when you fix the vitamin D receptor. You can treat major depressive disorder with it. Major depressive disorder will go away if you can do this with the intestinal microbiome. Another study came out right after it. Well, if you can fix the intestinal microbiome this way, it changes people's personalities. They become more outgoing and more social. And then with your background, you probably, being social, we're social animals. You're out there socializing with people. That's therapeutic for you as well, right? And
Totally.
so that we always, that foundational triad is a big one to fix the gut. Even if you're not quite sure what's going on with the gut, you're going to be turning it around. Now, you also got to get rid of these infections because oftentimes there's infections in the gut because with this intestinal microbiome shifting the wrong way, bad bugs get in from the outside. And so you get these chronic smoldering infections of the gut, but also it's these infections that go to different body parts that tend to make the body part the weak spot. So this disrupted immune system will start making antibodies against our own body parts. Why this body part versus that body part? Well, a lot of times there's an infection there that made that body part a weak spot. And so you got to get rid of these infections, even if you're not quite sure where they are, what they are. That's okay. And this tends to be a big one missed is the infections causing the stuff. And so we use this broad spectrum antimicrobial often, most of the time out of Canada, which is a nano silver called pH structured silver solution. And it's a nano silver. It'll get rid of any infection, no matter where it's at, no matter whether you know what kind it is, it'll get rid of it. Now, because it's a nano silver, it never bioaccumulates. So historically, people in all cultures around the world have used silver in the form of colloidal silver to get rid of infections. And it's very good at getting rid of the easy infections, the ones that give you the fever. You can use it for a couple of weeks, it goes away. Totally cool. Now, places in India, the silver they use is like silver paper and it bioaccumulates and it will turn people blue. And blue is a lovely color. It's not a good color for people. So you don't want to use colloidal silver. You can't use it to get rid of these chronic infections, but nano silvers will get rid of them. And it's so cool. You can use it long enough to get rid of them because you guys are stubborn, like 3, 6, 9 months to get rid of oftentimes. Doesn't take that long to get feeling better because just getting their numbers down makes a huge change. But also the water. It's called structured water and pH balanced. And take a mini deep geeky science dive is this has to do with the biophysics of water molecules, not the biochemistry, biophysics of water molecules that will get rid of inflammation and help damaged tissue heal. Fascinating science behind it. They first discovered this property of this structured water because they would use it in burn patients to keep them from getting infections in their burn injuries while they're trying to heal it. But then they saw that the tissue was healing so much faster. And they're like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. What's going on? Well, it turns out that a big central mechanism of staying healthy or being sick is epigenetics. It's not what genes we have, it's which ones get turned on and turned off. So this is where epigenetics is the things that alter gene expression without changing the genetic code itself. And so when people aren't feeling well, it's because they've turned on the bad genes and turned off the good genes in every cell in their body. So it's so easy to get a lot of things going the wrong way at the same time. But it's also why everything can go the right way at the same time. So everything we talk about so far works by flipping genes the right way. People go, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And I feel better all these different ways. Well, sure enough, the structured water, there's 88 cells that code for healing in a skin cell. This structured water upregulates the activity of 59 out of the 88 genes so the skin cells can heal better. It's like, oh my gosh, that is such a deep central mechanism. But that's what happens when you fix the gut. That's what happens when you create calm by meditation or getting out in nature. That's what happens when you fix the gut and get rid of vitamin deficiencies and all this kind of stuff. Start flipping genes. This is the body. The body can fix any cell, any body part all at the same time.
Wow. So where can one get the silver that you mentioned as well as the water? Is the water the byproduct of fixing all of this and essentially it's made within you? To
Well, that's such an interesting point. So um, our liquid in our body will shift to more of a structured form with cosmic radiation. It you take these water molecules and they kick out protons and they start stacking like pallets on top of each other, and it makes for the most interesting biophysics of water molecules that kind of happens naturally. It's one reason why, as far as I understand it, and my micro understanding of this is that's when you drink water from like a stream bed that's really moving fast, and you taste the water, it tastes different than the water coming out of the tap. It's like, oh my gosh, this is like water energized, or this is like the pure water. It's because the biophysics of the water molecules have shifted to make it that way. Um, but this is a nice way to get these therapeutics. So this pH structure silver solution is available, and it's just an absolute game changer.
And that's like an over the counter, I'm assuming.
Well, ideally, you have to get it from medical practitioners, and it is available on my website as a medical practitioner. We teach people how to use this stuff. There's no downside. Like I mentioned, it doesn't bioaccumulate, but you can actually get it off my website, for example. And this is part of where we're trying to educate people where this stuff comes from. So, like my free educational online email course called Medical Build Detox, we want to teach people 7 emails. Each one takes a deep dive in this stuff. First one's all about epigenetics, a deep dive into why people get this, but also we want to teach people how they can turn this around themselves. Because even though the body is super, super complicated, it is super, super logical. And if you understand the logic behind anything, it just makes sense. Well, if you understand the logic behind the body, you go, well, that makes sense. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. I mean, anybody can be logical. And if you just explain it in the right way, people go, oh, well, of course, that's how it works. Yeah.
And you said that the silver takes 6 to 9 months for some people to really do its
Well,
work.
it can take like 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months sometimes to get rid of these infections that drive chronic disease. Now, the healing process, oftentimes feeling better, is a lot quicker because just as you're getting rid of these infections that are causing inflammation, just as you're getting rid of the vitamin deficiencies that are causing inflammation, just as you're resetting cortisol, the stress hormone, through meditation or nature, resetting it, you just start feeling better, better, better. Now, you might not feel your total best yet because you haven't gotten rid of all the stuff, including these infections. And what we end up doing with the pH structure silver solution is once somebody feels 80, 90% better overall, everything that was bugging you originally, it's all connected. So that it all should get better at the same time. Some things a little quicker than others. But once you're 80, 90% better overall, we say go ahead and stop the pH structured silver solution. Let's see how you do without it. And if you stay good without it, you're like, hey, I stopped that. I'm totally cool still. Fantastic, great. You got rid of the infections that were driving chronic disease. And now we hopefully got you so healthy, they'll never rear their ugly head again. But if you're the person that stops it and goes, uh-oh, I'm starting to backslide here within a couple days, a week maybe, ooh, almost had them gone. They weren't quite gone. They're trying to build their numbers again. You hop right back on it. And typically within a couple days, you're right back to feeling great. Use it for 2 months, try to stop it again. With the goal being you eventually can stop it. You stay great without it. They're gone. Got you so healthy, you'll never let those dudes ever rear their ugly head again.
Amazing, amazing. We'll definitely put the links in the show notes. Definitely encourage people to go there. We'll talk more about that and the free courses and everything you offer. But that's something I'm highly interested in. And I'm not a doctor, don't claim to be one, but I would love to learn more because for my own health, my family's health, and everyone I talk to, right? Because this sounds amazing, and I believe it 100% because I've seen different elements. In fact, it's funny. I have a bottle of probiotics right in front of me. I started taking this a couple months ago. I take vitamin D. I don't have. Is it what was the other one?
It's called butyrate.
Butyrate.
Butyrate, made by the body. As I've referenced that TUDCA,
Yes.
made by the liver, bile acid. Well, here's this butyrate made by the good bacteria, a short chain fatty acid. Oh my gosh. Of course, it's great for the gut, right? Because the gut bugs make it for the gut. But butyrate prevents cancer 5 ways, treats cancer, kills cancer 5 ways, does all this amazing stuff. And you're like, oh my gosh, our body is like the ultimate multitasker. It is never going to make one thing to do one thing. It makes one thing to do like 200 things. It's like, oh, it is so smart.
So simple too, right? You don't have to complicate things too much. So then with probiotics, butyrate, and then the vitamin D, these are supplements that ideally you should be taking on an ongoing basis, or I guess supplement with the right foods too, I would imagine.
Well, there's these things we can do to get at these central mechanisms, but you really don't have to use it forever. Because once you fix the system just takes over and does all the work for you. So once you fix that intestinal microbiome, for example, now you have all those good bacteria, they make the butyrate for you. Don't need that as a supplement anymore. And you got such a good intestinal microbiome, maybe the probiotics that you were taking every day, maybe just to kind of maintain it long term, maybe take it once a week. Vitamin D is about the only thing that we tell people you want to keep taking forever on a daily basis. Because as humans, we're so bad at making vitamin D from sun exposure. When you do a blood test for vitamin D, simple test, anybody can run it, you want to be between 70 and 90 on your levels. Lifeguards in San Diego, great tans, on the beach every day. They're in San Diego, which is closer to the equator where most people live. They're in the mid 40s. They're 40 points lower than they should be living on the beach in San Diego. So if you're not taking the right amount of vitamin D to get your vitamin D level in a really good place, 70 to 90, you're suffering because of it. So this is where your body could take over everything, do all the work. You don't need hardly any supplements anymore. You want to take your vitamin D every day. But this is where then to stay good, this is where all the lovely lifestyle comes from. Make sure you're sleeping well. Make sure you're managing stress well. Make sure you're moving, exercise. Make sure you get out in nature. Make sure that you're eating clean. So I kind of talk about lifestyle as making sense. SENSE. So S, stress management. E, eating as healthy as you can. N, nature. Got to get out of nature. Oh, nature heals. And then E, exercise. Got to keep moving. And S is sleep hygiene. But if you make sense with what you're doing with your lifestyle changes, that's what it's going to help you get to where you want to go, but that's going to keep you where you want to go once you get there. The body will just take over and do all the work itself.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Yes. And as I'm on my own journey here of transformation across physical and all other pillars, I'm seeing them more and more. And the power of nature, unbelievable. When I started adding multiple walks a day with my dogs through nature, because I'm fortunate enough to live in a place here in Canada where there's a lot of nature, so I can walk through. Transformational, just that practice alone. Of course, there was other things, but
Phenomenal.
beautiful. So with vitamin D supplementation, that's something I started supplementing not long ago. I mean, I'm in Canada, so I get even less sun. I'm behind the computer a lot, right? Like most people are indoors. How do you find the right dosage to take?
Well, most people need between 5,000 and 10,000 IU per day just to stay good once they get it. So oftentimes people need more. So typically what you'd like to do is pick a dose, 5,000, 10,000, use it for about 8 to 10 weeks, and then get tested to see if that's the perfect level for you. And then for about every 10 points you're lower than you want to be, increase the dose by 1,000 a day, kind of a thing. Now, typically, different countries are different. We're fortunate enough in my clinic, we see people, adults and children, from every state in the US and across 21 time zones worldwide. So every country has that little interesting stuff. So in the United States, for example, you can go online, order your own blood tests, get a printout, go to a lab, and they'll draw them for you. Now in Canada, it's not quite that simple sometimes. It's a very interesting system where if the lab doesn't feel like you need a test, they're not sure what their criteria is, they just won't run it. Or I've also had people where they go, well, we're not sure if they ran it or not because they said it's a little bit of an unusual test. So they sent it to someplace in Canada to batch it, and they'll only run it once they get enough of those tests to run it one shot. But they won't tell me if it's been batched or just not run until a few months from now, and then if it hasn't come back yet, it probably wasn't batched. And so it's a little interesting. So, but even saying that, if you just take like 5 to 10,000 IU a day, you'd be much better than not taking. And you'd rather be higher than you need than lower than you need. There's this great case study I just read the other day that happened in India where somebody had pancreatic cancer, and pancreatic cancer is, that's a tough diagnosis. And 80, 90% of people die within a year, all this kind of stuff. And so this woman was diagnosed, and they go, well, as advanced as your pancreatic cancer is, you probably won't make it, more than 2 months. Well, they told her, why don't you take some vitamin D? Well, she went and got the prescription kind, which is 50,000 IU per capsule. So if we're talking 5 to 10,000 IU a day, well, if you take 50,000 a week, that averages 7,000 a day. So she took 50,000 every day for an entire 8 months. And she went back in, and they go, oh my goodness, your pancreas, we wanted you to do this like radiation and chemo, but she decided not to. Well, they came back, and actually the pancreatic cancer after 8 months wasn't more advanced than it was, and actually was regressing. And they go, geez, what have you been doing? Did you do this chemo? And she goes, well, no, but I did this 50,000 IU per day. And they go, well, you weren't supposed to do that kind of dose. She's like, oops, I'm sorry. I must have gotten confused. Well, her vitamin D level was so high they couldn't count. It was more than 150, but she didn't have any adverse reaction to it. It wasn't bugging her. And it was the only thing she was really doing. And here's somebody who should have been dead in 2 months. 90% of people don't even live a year. Well, here she is 8 months later, and the cancer actually was starting to regress, was starting to get smaller. And so if you overshoot, it's kind of nice to know. If somebody got multiple sclerosis, we like their vitamin D to be above 100. If you got cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke in your history, we want you more than 100 because for certain things you need to be a little higher. But even if you're not perfect with vitamin D, that's okay. You got to trust the inherent intelligence of your body, right? So if a woman's vitamin D gets above 60, she automatically has decreased the risk of ever getting breast cancer by 82%.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
If a woman keeps her vitamin D above 50 during pregnancy, she's automatically decreased the risk of her child ever getting the autoimmune disease multiple sclerosis. It's cut the risk in half. We'd have 100 less MS, multiple sclerosis cases every week in the US if a woman just kept her vitamin D above 50 during pregnancy. And then this incredible study out of northern Finland where they took every kid born in 1966, followed them for 31 years. They said, okay, so half of you kids, we want you to take 2,000 IU of vitamin D every day for a year of life. Tiny dose, 2,000. Nobody comes close to being fully therapeutic at 2,000. Just take 2,000. Just do it the first year of life. We don't care what you do after the first year. We're going to follow you for 31 years. They saw a 90% reduction in type 1 diabetes, the diabetes that requires insulin your whole life, ideally. 90% reduction by doing that one thing, tiny little thing, first year of life. And oh, by the way, the kids seemingly never got schizophrenia. So good for the brain to do that, they didn't even get schizophrenia. So this is where a little bit goes a long way. And once again, we also say, well, you don't need to be perfect. You just got to be perfect enough to get your body in a position to heal this stuff. Body's so smart.
My mind is blown here, Dr. David. I want to thank you so much for all this information. And it's funny because the pills I got here in Canada for vitamin D, there are 1,000 units per pill. I started with one pill, that's why it says on the bottle. Then I went to 3 pills lately, but I'm way under by the sounds of it. So I'm definitely gonna increase that and see where it leads, because it sounds like it's the answer to a lot of our problems. And you do hear it a lot. Oh, vitamin deficiency, you're up in the north, you gotta take more vitamin D. But it's not just about the seasons, like you said, right? Even the people sitting in the sun all day long near the equator, they don't have enough. And I wonder, perhaps it's not really relevant, but how do we evolve as humans if even if we are in the sun all the time, we're not absorbing it? I'm assuming it has to do with the environment as well.
Well, we were better at making vitamin D from sun exposure in the past than we are currently. There's multiple reasons why they think that is. One of them is that ratio of the different omega fatty acids, 369, the good versus the bad. Our ratio of bad to good has shifted, and that's making it more challenging to make vitamin D from sun exposure. But also, people that live farther away from the equator who would typically find it harder to make vitamin D, they consume foods that had a lot of vitamin D in it, like oily fish. I did a video a while ago about the vitamin D content in all kinds of different fish and seals and whales and walruses. And as you go up the food chain in the sea, plankton have vitamin D. Well, then every animal that eats, the bigger, they get more and more vitamin D. And so the vitamin D levels in seals is astronomically high. Mainly they store it in all their fat. But this is where humans like the Inuit Eskimos, the first people, they ate a lot of those kind of foods. So their vitamin D levels were super high, super high. That's why they never got heart attacks and strokes. They ate fat, but it all had vitamin D in it. They never got heart attacks and strokes. It's when they shifted to more of the westernized diet, they started getting heart attacks and strokes, kind of a thing. And so when you look at the vitamin D content of fish, in Europe, farm-raised fish only has 20% of the vitamin D as wild-caught fish of the same kind. So even if you're eating a lot of fish, if it's farm-raised, you're not getting the vitamin D you used to be able to get, and most people are not eating the food that has the high vitamin D content in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes so much sense, right? So it sounds like you can get some vitamin D from food, but since sometimes you can't trust the source, it's better to still supplement and just go that way because that's a lot more direct. And Are all vitamin supplements, these supplements essentially fairly equal? Because I know with certain supplements they release better, you get more of the percentage of whatever it says on the bottle than others. Have you found anything with that?
Yeah, and that is a beautiful point to bring up. Is there's very specific brands that allow their products to be independently tested by third-party companies. We make it, but before we sell it to consumer, we're going to let you test it to tell us if it has in it what it's supposed to and doesn't have something in it that you shouldn't. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is bound by law to do that. They can't sell to the consumer before they do that. But the supplement industry is not held to those standards, though there are ones that do it. But the thing is, so much of what you can get at your local store is not the good stuff. There's such a problem with the things not being in the product that's on the label, or there's fillers and other things in it that shouldn't be in it, that really, if you're just getting stuff over the counter, you really can't get healthy. You can't turn this stuff around. There was such a problem. A researcher in the state of New York decided to test this. And so he pulled all these products off all the shelves of all these big stores in New York, for example. They had them tested by outside companies to see if it had in them what they said they had in them. Well, most of the products were nothing but his quote was, "Well, geez, most of the stuff is nothing but ground up house plants. It doesn't have anything in it that is supposed to." And the attorney general in the state of New York was so appalled that he pulled all the supplements off all the shelves. There was no supplements to be had in the whole state of New York. Now everybody forgot about it. Eventually, they came back on. But one of the spokesmen for one of these big companies that sells tons of supplements go, "Geez, we had no idea this was a case." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you sell 1,000 fish oil capsules for $2, and you're like, oh, we're surprised the quality is so poor." It's like, oh, you guys, come on now. And so this is where you really got to get these supplements. And I see this all the time. So, like, for example, vitamin D, we'll have somebody using like the vitamin D that's on my website, got their level perfect. They come back 3 months later, we want to recheck them just to make sure they're good. And they're down like 40 points. And I'm going like, oh, that's so weird. You're still taking the same, same D3 5000, 3 capsules a day. Well, yeah, but I'm not taking that one. I went and got one in my local store because I ran out, and rather than ordering it online, I just went and got it. But I'm still taking the same amount, the 15,000. I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't have in it what it says, or it has fillers that are making it impossible to absorb. And so you really want to make sure you get the right stuff so that it has in it what it says and it doesn't have in it what it should, including, so many people have sensitivities to gluten and wheat, and so many products use wheat as a filler or lactose as a filler. So many people have lactose sensitivity. They use it as a filler, and all these fillers are just, you're like, why would you put that in as a filler? That's what bugs everybody, kind of a thing.
Hey, beautiful soul. Thank you so much for watching this conversation with Dr. David Bilstrom. Amazing stuff, right? You might be excited to go to his website and buy some of the supplements he mentioned. I know I have already done that, and I'm recommending it to pretty much all my friends and family because this can be life transformational. Now, I want to ask you a small favor. If you do end up wanting to buy any of his supplements, would you please use our referral link, which you'll find in the show notes below? That way, not only will you get the best deals and you'll get those amazing supplements, but you also get to support our show. So then we can bring more of these amazing conversations, and we'll have Dr. David back on the show for part 2 and then part 3 and so on. So thank you so much for your support. And let's get back to it really quick. Thank you. Wow, beautiful. So that's really good to know. And I was imagining that's the same with probiotics and any other supplements we look at.
It very much can be. Yeah. So you want to kind of do your due diligence and find the products, because usually they're going to be online is where the best products are, because when in stores they kind of place them on the shelves based on how much the company pays for the advertising thing. And so the really good companies say, well, we'll put our money into the quality, not on stocking fees, kind of a
Yes.
thing.
Wow, beautiful. And you mentioned your website. We'll talk about that in a bit here, but can anyone from any place in the world order, or is that more for a US based clientele?
No, thank you for asking that too. So because we see people, kids and adults from 21 time zones around the world, we really had to, and we just changed this about 6 months ago. We had to have a way to get the stuff that these people need to turn this really super well established chronic disease around. We had to be able to get it. So on my store now, we use a shipping company that can ship anything pH structured silver, any of these supplements, anywhere in the world. And so we can get the kids in Australia this stuff, or England, or all over the place, because you have to have the stuff that can turn this around if you're going to turn it around.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned children and young adults, and I know reading up on you before we got a chance to meet, you do a lot of work with young adults, and you believe that that's ideally where you start to have a much, much healthier life and not have issues until you're 90. Can we talk a bit about that and what you have seen with children these days?
Yeah. So, ideally, we're teaching people how to stay healthy. So, when you look at epigenetics, what genes are turned on and turned off, what you like to do is work with prospective parents before they even conceive a child. You can do things like do the meditation, get out in nature, let's get your vitamin D really good. It doesn't have to be a lot of complex stuff, but some really important stuff. So they start flipping genes the right way in themselves. Because we know that if you flip genes the right way before conceiving a child, you actually pass on cleaner genes to the next 6 to 8 generations. The corollary is if you don't do that, you pass on crummier genes to the next 6 to 8 generations. So we're all the products of the previous 6 to 8 generations. And so this is where you hear things like we're living the traumas of past generations, like emotional traumas, right? And so people, descendants of Holocaust survivors, have a lot more epigenetic problems and disease than people that didn't live through that. They had this thing called the Dutch hunger winter of 1944, 1945, where they didn't have food. And it terribly adversely affected their epigenetics. Their descendants are unhealthy compared to other people that didn't go through that. On the other hand, you also had this time when people couldn't get wheat in a certain part of Europe for a while because of food shortages. Their descendants have less type 1 diabetes. It's like, oh, that's so cool, that gluten. That's not so good for some people. You want to optimize epigenetics before conception. But then there's things you do during pregnancy that are optimizing epigenetics and optimizing neurodevelopment. So you make it less likely they'll get autism spectrum disorder developmental delays. And so this butyrate is really great during pregnancy to help with neurodevelopment. Probiotics during pregnancy decrease the risk of getting every pregnancy-related complication you can think of. So whether it's nausea and vomiting is less, high blood pressure, blood sugar control issues, premature delivery, preeclampsia, all these risk factors of things that happen during pregnancy, you decrease it simply by using probiotics. And so vitamin D, probiotics, and butyrate, for example, doing your meditation, getting out of nature during pregnancy, oh my gosh, does that help? And then here at the newborn, some vitamin D. If they're preemie, you probably want to add some TUDCA because premature infants don't make as much of the bile acids that you need to digest your food, but they don't turn into the secondary bile acid like this TUDCA that the cells in the pancreas need to make insulin. Preemies have more type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes as an adults than newborns because their liver is just not making this bile acid TUDCA as much as it should. So there's really things you can do in every stage of life, including you like to optimize epigenetics then before age 19 as best you can, because then you just don't get stuff as an adult. If you can do that early, you just don't get stuff. But then you have your epigenetics in a good place, so then you get to pass it on to the next 6 to 8 generations, and now you've made your descendants healthier than even you were when you started, probably.
That's actually something I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, all this is fascinating.
And we have 2 levels of courses for non-medical people. We have 2 levels of courses for medical people because I'm so passionate about teaching patients and medical professionals all this information. Um, we have blog posts such as the vitamin D does it again, the 2018 study I referenced. There's so much good information, 2 parts of that one. You can access all the social media platforms that we share information with. You can access the YouTube channel. I have over 150 different videos about this stuff, and each one is at least about 1, 2, 3 scientific articles because I want to make sure people know this is the science. This is the science of this stuff. And the 7-day free online educational email course we call the medical bill detox. Because when you get these chronic health issues, test after test, surgery after surgery, med after med, you can rack up a big bill in the United States with these chronic health issues. We want to teach people how not to do that. Now, there's other countries where that's not quite the case. And so, actually, we have such a large following in French speaking Europe and North Africa. My wife, who actually is a psychotherapist, she's an expert on adverse childhood events and how they drive chronic disease and what to do about it. She and I have spoken at 4 different French-speaking conferences in North Africa and the EU last year alone, because this is a universal problem. We're actually getting a good friend of mine who's a researcher in France is translating the free online educational email course and my book into French as we speak. But we need to change the name because in the French-speaking countries, they don't have some of the health care issues that United States gets. It's not all about saving money. It's just like, I need to be healthy, and this is the way we're going to do it.
Oh, I love that, Dr. David. So beautiful. Let me ask you this. This might be one that's easy to answer, maybe not. Why don't more people know about this stuff? Why are not more doctors aware of all these beautiful studies and all these correlations and help their patients with this?
Well, there's such a huge explosion of medical knowledge. It is impossible to keep up. It is so challenging as a medical doctor just to keep up with what you're already doing, to kind of stay on the cutting edge. If you can read a couple journal articles and a couple magazines every month, boy, that's pretty good. And so, they kind of talk about you don't know what you don't know. And so, I may know how to reverse autoimmune disease and how to prevent it, but if you need a colonoscopy, don't ask me to do it. That's not my thing. But then again, the doctor who does a colonoscopy may not know how to turn around Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, that kind of stuff as well, right? So everybody knows their stuff. So this is where we're trying to make it easier for all medical and non-medical people to understand this, even if they're not the one that's going to then do the treatment themselves. At least the medical practitioners know, like, oh, we can do this. Oh, cool. I'm going to find somebody for my patient who can do this for them. And that's hopefully where we get there. But oh my gosh, the amount of I've lectured a lot for a lot of years, and I always talk about things like, well, back in 1850, medical knowledge was doubling every 50 years. Well, then by 1940s, it was doubling every 15 years. Well, then by 1970, it was doubling every 7 years. And I would say, well, geez, by 2021, medical knowledge is going to double. Let's see, we double every 6 months. Well, now it's doubling like every 2.5 months. It's just so much stuff coming out, which makes it fascinating. So I do these deep dives like on the weekends, just reading as many articles as I can and just going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this information's out there. I can use it in clinic tomorrow to do this kind of stuff.
You're absolutely right, especially with advancements of technology and artificial intelligence. I'm sure they will speed things up even more. And then so much information, so little time, and most people are so busy. Makes sense. So that's why we're so grateful to have people like yourself that specialize in one area, can go deep, and then can pass on the knowledge, like you said, to both lay people as well as specialized people. I love that so much. Thank you, David. I guess in summary, if I may, to treat an autoimmune disease, to prevent a lot of those diseases you talked about, it really comes down to the gut health. And you treat that or you improve that by supplementing, right? With the 3 supplements you mentioned, plus the silver. And the water you mentioned, is it also supplement, or that's more like a finding that we have and that you can really buy that water?
So that structured, the pH balance structured water is actually part of that pH structured silver solution that we use to get rid of the infections, but then it also gets rid of inflammation, helps damaged tissue heal. And so if you can heal the gut, now managing stress is really important. Stress always nails the gut. And so this is where, doing at least a couple minutes a day of some kind of relaxation, something, get out and walk your dogs, do the deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, repetitive prayer, whatever it is, that couple minutes a day of creating calm is really teaching your body what calm feels like. Because with all this health stuff that would be going on to somebody, that stress hormone cortisol always gets kicked up into the stress mode. And the body stress is stress. Physical stress, emotional stress, spiritual stress, it's all stress. Kicks you up and locks you in place. Well, then we say, well, let's get rid of these things that are causing physical stress. We'll get rid of the infections. We'll get rid of the vitamin deficiencies. We'll heal the gut. Go get rid of some toxins. Well, now cortisol is in a position to reset, to get in a calm mode. And we go, okay, cortisol, come on now. Time to get in a calm mode. And cortisol looks at us like, what are you talking about? We're like, well, the calm mode. And cortisol goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been stuck here so long. I got no clue what calm feels like. And we're like, oh, that's right. We have to teach you what calm feels like. Get out, walk your dog, do your deep breathing. Body goes, ah. And then you can fix anything, including it's the cortisol that gets stuck in the stress mode that suppresses the immune system that allows the infections that get in that drive chronic disease. So by resetting cortisol, now your immune system can keep those dudes at bay the rest of your life.
Amazing. And I more recently, in the last couple of years, I've introduced a gratitude practice, a meditation practice, and I've seen amazing benefits. I never correlated it with reducing the stress hormone, which makes sense, right? Because you get into a state, by choice or otherwise, where you are feeling better and you are giving time to yourself, be it in nature or otherwise. Yeah, that's so powerful. And I know that most of us, because we're so busy and we're so stuck on these devices, it's very hard to give ourselves time for that. Such a beautiful reminder.
And this is where, some powerful things like mind body medicine, all this super powerful. Oh my gosh, so powerful. But then sometimes you go, geez, it's not quite working like we had hoped. Well, there's got to be something getting in the way. And this is kind of the gut health, for example. Or you have a musculoskeletal issue, you go to PT, physical therapy. Oh, this is going to work great. Yeah, so weird. It didn't work like I would hoped it would. Got to go back to the foundation. Then you go back to the physical therapist and go, oh my gosh, now it worked just like I hoped the first time. Or you go back to the counseling, like, oh my gosh, it was so much easier for me to do this work and come out the other side feeling great because I got this foundational work. So, really, truly, if you get this foundational stuff, it makes everything else so much more likely to be able to help people the way it's supposed to. And one reason why it doesn't always do that, but there's always a good reason why it works, always a good reason why it doesn't. Usually it's like, yeah, I got something to heal on the inside to make this other thing do the work it's supposed to.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you implement some of these changes, like the supplementation and maybe walking in nature or meditation, you can see impacts fairly quickly. You won't get healed overnight, but the impacts will start to compound essentially, if I understand
Absolutely.
correctly.
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah, wow. Dr. David, honestly, I could talk with you for hours and hours and days. In the interest of time, I want to give you a chance. Is there anything else that comes up for you that is important for the audience to know, for people to know and take action on that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think what's important to know is if you're somebody who's not feeling well, that's not you. That's just your body having some things going on that's not right. So to become the best version of yourself, if you fix this, you become the best version of yourself. So we kind of talk about the autoimmune lifestyle. When you have autoimmune disease, you can feel so sick, have no quality of life, but that's not you. That's you with an illness, and then when you get rid of that illness, you feel great. You're back to your best version of yourself. You can do the things that make life worthwhile, enjoyable, whatever it is. Play with your grandkids, your kids, be there for you. Do become the best version of yourself. So it's very empowering to get at these fundamental issues driving you crazy, driving you not feeling good. But that's not you. That's just you not feeling good. There's a video that I might refer people to that's accessible through my YouTube channel called A 2-Year-Old's Story of Celiac Disease, So Much More Than Gluten-Free. So here's a child, terrible cognitive emotional stuff right from the get-go, terrible gut issues right from the get-go. And got so bad by 14 months of age, they took him to a major children's hospital, and they said, oh, you got celiac disease. You have the autoimmune disease attacking your small intestine. You just got to get rid of gluten and wheat. You're going to be fine. When they got rid of gluten and wheat, he wasn't fine. He kept getting worse and worse and worse. So they came to see us at 28 months of age, and he was terrible. And the main problem he was having, he'd have these fits 10 to 14 times a day where he'd try to smash his head on the wall, head on the floor. Parents would try to restrain him for his own good. He'd try to scratch their faces. So when they came in, one thing I said is, well, you got to get rid of the foods that are causing issues. You got to get rid of the reason why the foods caused you the issues. You got to fix the gut, right? So we looked at the gut. We fixed these central mechanisms. A year later, totally fine. Totally fine. And the mom said, this lovely video she did, she said, that child with all those health issues, that was not my child. That's just my child with really messed up biochemistry, a messed up system. My fun-loving, happy-go-lucky child now a year later, that's my son. And so this is where you can become the best version of yourself if you get rid of these things that are dragging you down. And oh my gosh, you can probably get so much better than you ever thought you could.
Getting teary-eyed as you're saying the story is such a powerful story, because a child obviously cannot do anything by himself in the case, right? And it needed support from others. But to your point, anything can be reversed should you address the cause, not just treat the symptoms,
Yeah.
which seems to be something that our society likes to do a lot. Is just throw another pill at it, throw another distraction at it, is just treating the symptoms.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Dr. David. Awesome. Thank you so much for our beautiful conversation. We'll have all the links in the show notes. We'll put all of that there. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you again.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at unleashthyselftoday, TikTok and YouTube at unleashthyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. Or if you'd like to have a conversation with me or work with me, please feel free to email me directly at constantine@unleashthyself.com. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose, with purpose. See you in the next episode.